Is that Airbnb that you're planning on buying going to be an ATM or a money pit? Let's get into it. Hey guys, how you doing? Werenka here from Simply Home. I'm the broker for the state of Michigan, and I've got an all-star team. So whether you're looking to buy, sell, invest, rent, whatever you need, we've got you covered. We even do property management now. Just wanted to take a few minutes today to give an update on short-term rental properties, Airbnbs, Verbos, that type of thing, because for several years now, short-term rental properties have been more and more popular for investors to pick up, even just people that are buying like one-off properties instead of keeping it as a long-term rental. There's been a lot of people that have put these homes on Airbnb to the point now where the market may be starting to get oversaturated. So we're going to talk about, kind of Airbnb and Verbo, we'll just say short-term rentals or STRs. Take a look at how that's trending in the state of Michigan, what my thoughts are on that, what I expect to happen in 2026 and beyond. And obviously, if you've watched this channel for any length of time, I work with quite a few real estate investors. Currently, we are managing 3 short-term rental properties. In the past, I've had a couple other ones that we've gotten off the ground and then decided to sell them, which, obviously we listed those and sold them. But I probably have, a kind of unique insight into, getting them off the ground, what it takes to do that, actually running them day to day, and then kind of the trends as far as occupancy and any issues that we've come up against in that time. But jumping right into it, currently in the state of Michigan, since 2021, the number of short-term rental properties in the state of Michigan has exploded. Currently, there's over 32,000 short-term rentals in the state. And, one of the epicenters of that is obviously Metro Detroit. But, for example, like the Traverse City area, the number of short-term rentals in that neck of the woods grew by 40% between 2021 and 2025, to the point now where almost 1/3 of the available short-term rental units in the state are in the Traverse City area. But towards the end of that, towards, 2025 and moving into 2026, we're seeing the number of active short-term rentals in the state of Michigan kind of plateau. And I think there's a few reasons for that, especially like in the Metro Detroit area, because I'm going to speak mostly about this area because this is what I'm the most familiar with. But many of the cities around here that didn't have any kind of restrictions or ordinances regarding short-term rentals now do have them. And Ferndale specifically kind of has a cap on the number of short-term rentals. They're limited to 1 per block. We have other restrictions, like instead of the rental license being for 2 years on short-term rentals, is good for only 1 year. So you have to get it renewed every year. There's other restrictions to where the city can revoke your license if you get too many complaints from neighbors, things like that. We're seeing more and more of that happen. There's cities like St. Clair Shores is a notable example of this, where they don't even allow them at all. So, it's things like that that are hampering the growth of short-term rentals. But beyond that, occupancy, I think, is a bigger indicator of where we're going to go in terms of short-term rentals moving forward, because occupancy is starting to kind of like drift down. That's plateauing as well. So it's to the point now where I'm not so sure it's such a great investment, because you're going up against established and competing with established Airbnbs and Verbos, where, you might have like repeat guests, things like that. And it's just harder to break in to that market now, as opposed to just having a, long-term rental property. And to back that up, we're kind of starting to see like we have, the K-shaped economy right now in 2026. We're starting to see the same thing with short-term rental properties, because the average, like across the state of Michigan, the average occupancy rate is 49%, which isn't great. As someone who's hosted several of these, that's enough to, to more than break even and put some money in your pocket, but it's not what you're looking for. We like to target closer to like, 65 to 80% occupancy. You're gonna, and definitely the seasons have some impact on that as well. This is January right now, the slowest time of year for any Airbnb that I've ever, managed or been a part of. Obviously, the middle of summer, it's, most of the ones that we have are mostly booked, but we're starting to see like year over year slight declines in our booking rates as well. And that kind of plays out, the numbers bear that out actually, because the top performing STRs in Michigan, like the top 10%, typically see between a 75 and 83% occupancy rate. And then the median in Michigan is 39 to 43%. And then we're seeing like the lower tier short-term rentals, or the ones that are the new ones trying to break into the market, are only seeing 20 to 25% occupancy right now. And by right now, I mean like for the year, not just for this time of year, because obviously you'd expect to see that this time of year. You know, the winter months, generally speaking, will average about 25 to 30% occupancy. And then in the summer, you're going to get higher, ideally above 80%. So let's talk about some, anecdotal insights that I've just gathered over the years and kind of apply that to what we now know about the STR market right now in the state of Michigan. If you are thinking about purchasing a property to use as an STR, the number one absolute first thing you need to do is research the city that you're thinking about purchasing in. Call their building department, make sure it's even allowed to, that you're allowed to do that in that city, and then see what, if any, restrictions they have. Because, if you find the perfect house in Ferndale that'll make a great Airbnb, but there's one 3 doors down, that's not going to work. It's going to be a non-starter. The city won't allow it. So, it's just things like that. You really need to research your location more than you ever have had to in the past in order to build a successful short-term rental property. And then now that you've secured your property, now you have to set it up in a way that's, affordable yet desirable. You're going to want something that's relatively stylish. I found the best way is to, and the easiest way to do it is to just go like, at the risk of like just naming a specific store, like IKEA is a good place to go to stock up your Airbnb, because you can go in there and, the successful ones that we have right now are super easy to inventory, because there's 8 plates, there's 8 forks, there's 8 spoons, there's 8 knives. We just have like the same number of everything. So we can go through, inventory it in between guests, make sure nothing's broken, make sure nothing's missing. And if there is, then we can follow up from there. Then like the bedrooms, you want to make it easy to clean the sheets. I mean, I recommend like maybe white sheets with a duvet cover that adds a little pop of color or something like that. You want to try and make it look different from like a Holiday Inn or something like that. But, needs to have its own style. But at the same time, the people that come in and clean it need to be able to turn it around very quickly, because that whole house has to be, if you have somebody checking out and somebody checking back in the same day, you've only got a limited time to turn that entire house around and get it ready and make it fresh and clean and inviting for the next people. And to me, that's the most difficult part of managing any short-term rental, is having reliable cleaning services that can come in, because it's hit or miss. It's not, something that's guaranteed money. So you need somebody who's flexible enough to be able to drop everything and do the job. But at the same time, they're not like relying on that property for all their income, because who knows, you could go weeks in between guests, especially if you're like a brand new short-term rental that's just trying to break into the market. You're not going to probably book up that fast at the beginning. And then as far as like the pricing strategy, ideally, probably the best way to break in for the first, month or two that you have it on the market, you're going to want to price it really low just to get people to book it, so that you can start getting good reviews. Once you have, 5 to 10 5-star reviews, then you can start to like inch the price up a little bit. And at that point, people are going to go off the reviews, see that it's a nice place, and just book it, even though it's more expensive. But realistically, if it's something you're thinking about, my advice, unless you have another, like a feature, like if it's like waterfront, or, if it's close to, in the wintertime, like if you're up north close to like a ski mountain or something like that, then it's a little bit of a different story. But if you just, if you're going to just buy a house in Sterling Heights and turn it again into a short-term rental, I might advise against that, just because the market is starting to get oversaturated. And it's it's something to like try out at first and see how it goes. And then if it's not working out, then you can always turn it into a long-term rental. But at that point, you're in it for all the money that you spent to furnish the property. So there's that to consider as well. And there are websites that kind of specialize in consulting. There's one called airdna.com that I find is maybe paints a little bit of a rosy picture about what you can expect to get as far as like income for your short-term rental, or they give you like an occupancy projection. Those tend to, I think, be a little bit overblown. You're not going to quite get to their numbers most of the time, but at least it gives you a picture of, you know, what you can roughly expect. It gives, it shows you what the other short-term rentals are in the neighborhood, things like that, so you can see who your competition is. So, you know, that's even maybe pretty effective to use before you even purchase. So you can see if you're thinking about buying in an area and there's already like 6 Airbnbs within a couple blocks, you might have a challenging time breaking into that market. So you might consider somewhere else. So for that reason, I'd maybe check with those. In fact, I'm going to go so far as to say this, and I don't think I've ever said anything like this in any of my videos before, but if you're considering buying a property and you're thinking about using it as a short-term rental, as long as if you're working with an agent, you consult with them for sure. You know, if you're not, just in the stage where you're just thinking about it, just give me a call. My direct line is 586-491-5622. I can do that legwork for you if it's in the state of Michigan. I'm happy to, you know, just give a call to the building department, see if it's something feasible, if it's something that you're even allowed to do. And then we can kind of take a look at other, you know, top performing short-term rentals in that area, see what there is, you know, based on, versus what you're thinking about buying. And then we can even take another step and look at what long-term rentals are getting in that area, because maybe it's still a good property to buy, but maybe your best bet is to just keep it as a long-term rental, because that's going to give you a better return at the end of the day. And keep in mind, this is strictly where we're at in the winter of 2026. And the one constant in the real estate business, or the real estate market, is that it's always changing. So I might come back with another video in June and say, you're crazy if you don't buy a short-term rental right now because the market just blew up on them. I'm like, who knows? But I'm just giving you the real facts on the ground of where we're at right now at this point in time. It's a saturated market, and, you know, it's not like going down, but it's not really an explosive growth phase anymore either. So, you know, that's kind of where we're at. And, you know, there's renewed competition from hotels as well. You can see a lot of these, you know, older hotels, they all have facelifts now. They have more amenities. And consequently, you know, we've got Airbnbs at this point that have been out for, you know, 10, 12, 15 years that, you know, if they haven't undergone a facelift, they're starting to look a little dated. So, you know, the game's kind of flipping back. So, you know, that's one of those things where, you know, things are always evolving. There's always competition out there. So we kind of need to know, you know, where things are so that you can make a smart decision. That's where things are right now in January 6th. So hopefully this helps. If you have any questions about anything else or any advice that I didn't point out in this video, again, you can always reach out to me. Call or text me anytime, 586-491-56. Shoot me an email, Werenka@simplyhome.com. I'm on all the socials. Shoot me a DM. I'll respond quick. And as always, thank you so much for watching, guys. I truly appreciate it. We'll be back soon with another video, and have a great rest of your day.